The background footage is on a Deadeye, roughly 5 to 10 divines in League start gear. The expected damage on a Pathfinder is about 20% stronger, while the expected damage on Amazon is gonna be about 50% stronger. The expected damage with good gear is about 100 to 200% more based on investment. Hey, I'm Cyclone, and this is the definitive guide for the Poison Amazon, which I will be playing in the Last of Druid patch for Path of Exile 2. I am beyond excited to play this build. I've been cooking with it a lot, and when it got buffed in the patch notes, I was even more excited. Poison has been good for a while, but a lot of people have been sleeping on it because they've just been too busy playing Lightning Arrow. The build has S tier clear, good single target damage, and surprisingly good survivability. Now, it should be stated that GDG is still updating the patch notes, so anything in this video might still change. Even after league launch, we are in early access, everything is subject of change. It happens. If anything gets changed, I will adapt to it and adjust the patch and adjust the written guide and the PoB as quickly as possible. So I recommend that you recheck the written guide or the PoB on Friday and get the most up-to-date version. There's a changelog in the written guide that you can check and just see whatever changed. Speaking about it, I think this is to date the most detailed written guide and passive building I ever done. If you enjoy content this detailed and in this in-depth, I would highly appreciate if you could give the video a thumb up and leave a comment on it. It helps with the algorithm and it shows me that the effort is appreciated. Now let's finally talk about the big question. Why am I playing in Amazon? Well, the reason is simple. Amazon is better. Now, okay, I will explain a bit on it. Now, I wanted to play Pathfinder. I've been cooking on a Pathfinder for quite a while, and when it got buffed in the patch again, I was beyond excited. But then I realized how many people will also be playing a Pathfinder. Crouching Tuna is going to go Poison Pathfinder. Thubgun is going to be going Poison Pathfinder. And the whole community is likely as well, right? So I started looking at, okay, what do I do if everybody's Pathfinder? How can I be adding, first of all, my unique twist, and second, be slightly besides the meta on my items so they aren't giga expensive? Now, the answer to that was Amazon. And when I looked into it, I was very surprised to just how insane it is. I knew Amazon was the strongest ascendancy. I wanted to league start Amazon last league. There were some complications, but that is last league. Amazon adds an insanely good damage package, which is very much worthwhile at league start. Now, before we look at the Amazon, let me quickly say that Pathfinder is a-okay. You can do this on a Pathfinder, it works. The only thing is that we are using a slightly different weapon, using the same skill jump setup, we're using the same passive tree. Everything else is the same. In the written guide, I've added a section on the ascendancy, on the trees every time, that tells you what ascendancies to pick on a Pathfinder. You can just do this as a Pathfinder, everything's okay. I'm gonna go Amazon, but again, I will explain this further in detail in a moment. The Pathfinder has some very good stuff. let me head into the passive building to explain that. On a Pathfinder, we would be having something like this. Now, it's not exactly the same because the new nodes aren't in PoE yet, but we would be having overwhelming toxicity as a 2 node, so we only had these two would have been cut. Overwhelming toxicity gives us double the poison, which doubles our poison DPS, but it reduces the poison duration, so the max damage of our poison gets slightly reduced as we don't deal them over a longer time, but we can just counteract the downside by keep chucking more toxic rolls, keep doing more damage, and killing the enemies that way. Now this is all fine and dandy, but we have better things that on Amazon, again, getting there in a moment. Outside of this, Pathfinder doesn't really offer us more damage. Instead, it offers more quality of life. We have the Path Seeker, which is going to be the node that they add in front of Traveler's Wisdom, giving us either the Warrior start or the Sorcerer start, and which means we could access early energy shield, but this is not a detail I want to go in deeper. It also is going to give us 1 passive point from the Travel node likely, and 4 from the node itself. Then we have Traveler's Wisdom, which gets reworked into giving us alternative to the attribute nodes. Gonna be increased global defenses, increased damage, which is neat, but we are likely gonna be so stat stuffed on the Pathfinder that we can't take those, so I'm disregarding that for now. And then we have 2 huge quality of life nodes with Relentless Pursuit, which gives us unaffected by slows. This is Temp Chain, this is Maim, this is a Chilled Ground, all ignored, and we have Running Assault, which is on top of less slowdown when we use skills, and this also cannot be heavy stunned when sprinting. So it is a huge quality of life boost. The Pathfinder quality of life package is insane. And again, I was sold on Pathfinder already. I'm transitioning out of because of the damage and because of the attention. So let's finally talk about this damage that I keep mentioning. So Pathfinder, huge quality of life package, absolutely insane. But damage is what we are looking at league start. So in a league start scenario, we have the Amazon with just 3 nodes. So we don't even need to force lab. We don't even need to kill Zaruk the Timeless. All we need are 3 Ascendancy nodes. And these really pack a punch. The first node we can pick up is Predatory Instinct. Now, Predatory Instinct reveals a weakness against rare and unique enemies, and we deal 50% more damage against them while they have this open weakness. This is really powerful. For an on-hit build, this roughly translates to 25% damage, because during the open weakness phase, which is half of the enemy's life roughly, we deal more damage. Now, there's this big hit that over, but I'm not going into these details. But for poison, the damage of a poison is set the moment we apply it. So if we apply a poison during this Predatory Instinct open weakness moment, the hit gets this 50% more damage. Then 20% of the total damage of that hit is set as our poison damage. I'm talking about generically because we're using the Plaguefinger gloss, which all damage applies to poison. Side note on that. So now all our damage, we take this chunk of the damage, we save it as poison damage, and even if the open weakness closes, the poison is still there. The poison has this damage locked in, and it will continue to apply this until it runs out. So we have these giga chunking poisons that we apply during an open weakness, and they will deal enough damage to get us to the next open weakness where we can apply a new powerful poison, or kill the enemy outright. So this is insane, especially because we can use it as our first node in campaign, and we have an insane damage boost during the first couple boss fights that we are doing until we're getting the second node. And the second node is gonna be Critical Strike. Now, Critical Strike we use in package with Penetrate. We can either spec out of Predatory, but that's for the campaign video. In general, let me talk about these in general, not for campaign. Penetrate is very, very powerful. It doesn't give us just damage on its own, but it gives us a different vector to go with. We do not need to compete with Pathfinders on their weapon. Instead, we can use a high accuracy weapon. So we can use a weapon that has a decent fist damage or decent lightning damage because we use the Plaguefinger gloss, and then you just have a big chunk of accuracy rating. And suddenly, that is a very good bow for us. And this means we have bows that aren't under high demand, so they should be cheaper, that we can use to do more damage compared to bows that we could afford if we would only have the standard path. That's all there is to this node. It gives us more power early because we have an alternative bows we can take. And then critical strikes uses the accuracy we have on the bow, and all this accuracy is added as crit chance for us on top of the accuracy we get from all the dexterity travel nodes we are taking. We have a big chunk of dexterity. This gives us a big chunk of accuracy rating, which gives us a big chunk of critical hit chance. So with very little investment, we can get to a decent crit strike, and with decent investment, we can get to a fairly high critical hit chance, which is enough for us to start to regularly crit with our toxic growth, and then utilize these crit damage with a good amount of crit multi to deal way more damage with the poison. And this gives us enough time to fish for the next critical strike, so then that one also deals a lot of damage. So we have very easy access to crit, very easy access to damage, and then we have these open windows, so when we do a heavy crit, and our crit, which deals a lot of damage, with our bow that is cheaper than the Pathfinder bow, doing an open window, or open weakness window, we deal even more damage. And this more damage is again locked in for the poison, even if the open weakness closes. Overall, just a really good chunk of damage. So that much for the Amazon versus Pathfinder discussion. I'm gonna end it here with the statement of, you can go either way. If you really want to go Pathfinder, go Pathfinder. If you want to go Amazon, go Amazon. Both ascendancies work. Both have their upsides, both have their downsides. Choose whichever one you prefer and enjoy the league. Next, let's talk about the full single target rotation of the build. If we want to do all our damage, we are using Toxic Growth. I already talked about this, and Vine Arrow. I already talked about that. We deal a lot of poison damage with these. But we need to proc them. As you can see here, they take quite a while to explode. They take a whopping 25 seconds to do their damage. We are not waiting that long on a boss. The bosses are moving, the boss is trying to kill us, we can't wait 25 seconds. So we need to find a way to explode them early. And the best way to do that is applying poison to them. Now we could just fire Toxic Growth, fire Poisonburst, fire Toxic Growth, fire Poisonburst. And if you can see here, every time I do this, I'm losing a chunk of mana. And over time, I don't even have that much. And I don't quite like that. So I much rather have better mana sustain. So instead of using Poison Burst Arrow, we're using Gas Arrow. Now we get back to the Gas Arrow. Gas Arrow fulfills two things. First of all, if it does enough poison damage, it will instantly explode any push soul inside of it. So this is why we are keeping our Toxic Growth at level 5. And I get to that again back in a moment. But Gas Arrow also does something else. If we have it with escalating support, it applies a 5th poison if it is in weapon set 2. Now, because it applies 5 poisons and Toxic Growth only applies 4 poisons, and the way poisons work, they're all on the boss, but only the damaging ones apply and are shown as the number of poisons on the enemy. So we have 4 poisons of Toxic Growth because they are much, much stronger than Gas Arrows, and 1 poison of Gas Arrow that is applying because Toxic Growth can only apply 4, while Gas Arrow applies 5, is supported by Corrosion and will slowly break the enemy's armor until the enemy has no armor and is armor broken. And if the enemy's armor broken, they take 20% increased physical damage from hits. This means that our hits are slightly stronger, and that because the hits are slightly stronger, this means our poison is gonna be slightly stronger. It's just a neat thing to have, but it's just the hit part, the initial part that we lock in for the poison damage that we improve here. It's not the poison damage itself that we improve. Now, once we do this, that is all fine and dandy, but there is a second important part to this. I mentioned this, Toxic Growth is at level 5. We need the Gas Arrow normal damage. It can technically crit, but we need its normal damage, non-crit damage, to be enough to instantly proc every toxic push that lands inside of it. And you can see here, if I spam my Toxic Growth, you always see the explosion. If I were to do it here, you can see that they just disappear. They don't actually explode. But if I do it in the growth, you see them explode, you see them do their poison, I can spam this throughout the boss fight, and I could constantly apply new poisons on the boss, and I keep doing it until I hit the crit, and once I hit the crit, the boss health is just gonna plummet. We need to carefully level our toxic growth. So I recommend keep it at level 5, and only once you're in the end game, level it up. And keeping it at level 5 isn't really a downside. You see here that the attack damage at level 5 is 68. If I head into my POV, and we are looking at toxic growth here, at level 5 we have a bit of damage, and if we up it to level 20, it doesn't increase by that much more. The attack damage of the explosion at a level 20 gem is only 140. So this means that our toxic growth, all it loses, yeah, let's say 70%, sure. 70% damage. This is nothing compared to the 300 more damage we are getting whenever we instantly proc it. The faster we proc the partials, the better is on the on-hit part, and in the late game we can slightly delay it. If it takes half a second, that's still fine, it doesn't have to be instant, but we needed to do enough damage to close to instantly proc the growth pustules so that we can fish effectively for our crits. Once we only need 1 or 2 attacks, we can drop gas arrow, and we will just use poison arrow on it to proc the couple pustules we need to one-shot any boss in the game. Now, let's move over to Poisonburst arrow and our clear. This is gonna be getting a bit complex, so I prepared the image you just saw a bit earlier. Poisonburst arrow is having 2 portions. We attack this, and whenever it hits something, it causes this poison explosion. The second explosion does not hit, but inflicts poison as if it would have hit enemies. So the second thing is a guaranteed poison apply. The first hit, whenever we hit a specific enemy, is supported by bleed 3, and this bleed 3 poison is bleed 3 support makes our poison burst apply a bleed on the specific enemy we are hitting. This is just a neat extra part. To the good part we get now. You see up here, I have 2 heralds. Herald of the Plague and Herald of Blood. Herald of the Plague makes our most damaging poison spread. So whenever we kill an enemy, our poison of that enemy spreads to nearby enemies. This is neat to just proliferate strong poisons. But if we use Herald of Blood, what happens if we have a Herald chain? Herald of Blood, supported by Bleed and Poison 3, will cause an explosion that will only be able to poison. But if we support it also by Bursting Plague, this support that has an active portion yoinks the other support gems in Herald of Blood and applies it to itself. We also have it here up on our Poisonburst arrow. So these Bursting Plagues poison, when they explode, they can critical strike. They deal 20% of the enemy's life as physical damage to nearby enemies. So this can apply bleed and poison. So what's happening is the following. Let's start up here. So let's assume we have our state of, okay, we just applied a poison with our Poisonburst arrow. This poison kills an enemy. This procs Bursting Plague, which in my opinion is the most broken support we have access to. It deals 1/5 of the enemy's life as an explosion that is guaranteed. It has no downside. It only requires a gem spot. In PoE1, we generally, in PoE1 and PoE2, we have to jump through so many hoops to get explosions. We need to use bad weapons. We need to utilize a Sensi node. Getting explosion from a support gem is incredibly insane. So we have this Bursting Plague, which is, again, absolutely insane. I keep repeating it. This explodes. The explosion of that is causing another poison explosion, and is causing another poison to the enemy, nearby enemies, and can apply bleed to the enemies. Now that it applied bleed to the enemies, Herald of Blood is on the next enemy death, is causing a Herald of Blood explosion, which can poison enemies, which applies Bursting Plague on the enemies. So now that it dies to Bursting Plague again, it can bleed on the enemy, and it can Herald of Blood on the enemy. And this just keeps chaining, and on its own. We kill one enemy in a pack, and the entire pack will die. This can be enough to off-screen a rare just because it stood next to enough normal enemies. Now we need to see in the next patch, depending on the density and pack size of everything, this might be overkill, and we only need Herald of Plague, but we have access to it. And this works on both Pathfinder and on Amazon or on any other ascendancy, this way of chaining. Now this also spread it with Herald of Plague, which again poisons enemies, which again spreads Herald of Plague, which bursts Bursting Plague, and it starts the loop again. So this is also neat. We just have access to very powerful poisons, very powerful explosions. It is just amazing. Now that all out of the way, there's one major thing that I needed to put in this video. I know the video is long, but bear with me for 1 or 2 more minutes. I am using weapon sets. So when you look here, I have weapon set 1 and weapon set 2. And look at this satisfying shift. It starts down here and it shifts all the way over there. I find this very satisfying to look at. It's not as satisfying on the red ones, but the green ones, I just keep looking at it. It looked mesmerizing. Anyway, something I started doing, which not a lot of other people have picked up yet. I don't know which one is better, which way is better. It likely depends on the build, but I really like to be very effective on my passive point allocation. And instead of using weapon set 2 for, oh look, I'm applying shock with shock burst arrow or stormcaller arrow. And oh look, I'm applying despair on my weapon set 2 and everything else I do in weapon set 1. I only use good notables for clear on weapon set 1, like Preemptive Strike, 100% crit bonus against enemies on full life, or First Approach, crit chance and damage against enemies on full life, or Low Tolerance, damage if the enemy isn't poisoned, which only really works for clear. I use those notes only in weapon set 1 for clear, and in weapon set 2 I'm using +1 poison, another poison, poison duration, daze, which I'm likely only hitting an enemy once during clearing, so I don't need it for clear. Serrated edges, which only works against rare and unique enemies. I only use notes that I care about for single target damage in weapon set 2. Meaning all the damage I lose from not having the shock magnitude, not having the curse magnitude in my weapon set 2, I gain again from having very good passive points on weapon set 2 and very good passive points in weapon set 1. I personally like it. You can still use the classic approach. You will just cut out nodes like First Approach, Preemptive Strike, and Low Tolerance, or permanently allocate them. You will need to net through which ones you want to keep, which ones you don't want to keep. But this works anyway. I'm really happy with the weapon set 2. It's in the spirit of GGG's vision, so yeah. I like it. Feel free to use it. Feel free to use a standard approach. I'm gonna be in the upcoming week. In the next days till launch, I will try to get out a campaign guide for this as well. I've already added one in the written guide. It has a lot of information, but I want to have the video out as well to get even more information to you so have an even smoother experience with the build. Also planning to livestream and figure out how we want to run through Act 1. Enough of that. I will also be giving you daily updates once the league launches, so you can see all the changes I do on a daily basis. You can see what I'm trying out, if I'm trying out anything, and if I have any new toys, any new techniques to add to the build, or I do a big upgrade on my gearing, I will make an update video to let you know all the cool new things I discovered. All that being said, huge thanks to my Patreon supporters. I really appreciate you going the extra step and supporting me that way. Morphism, Kesuke, Desmosinas, I really appreciate it. And to everyone else, I'll be seeing you in my next video or next livestream. Goodbye.